طبعا روبن، أزمة الطاقة كانت أحد أبرز عناوين عام 2022 إن لم تكن الأبرز. ما هي أوجه الاختلاف مع أزمات الطاقة السابقة؟ وهل بالإمكان ربطها بسلسلة أحداث تاريخية وسياسات سابقة أدت إلى إعادة إنتاج هذه الأزمة بصورتها الحالية؟
Well, absolutely. So I think it was different in two big ways. One way is that the previous energy crises were really oil crises. They came out of oil related shocks related to conflict in the Middle East. If you look at 1973 or 1979, this conflict, of course, comes out of a war, of course, in Eastern Europe. And secondly, it's a shock across all energy types and other commodities as well, like metals and food. Again, the previous crises were really about oil only. This conflict has much more, in fact, been about gas and therefore about electricity. But it has also had an impact on oil. It's had an impact on coal. So it's a multi-commodity crisis, and that makes it harder to solve. You think you've solved the gas problem, but then you've got a problem with oil, you've got a problem with coal. So it makes it much trickier. And absolutely, this goes back to a bunch of decisions and trends that go back several years. Now, part of that is European decision to allow itself to become very dependent on Russian gas, and for Russia to, of course, deliberately to play on that and increase its gas supplies to Europe. Part of it are decisions by different countries in Europe to reduce their use of nuclear power, to reduce their domestic gas production, and therefore to become more dependent on imports and not to ramp up renewable energy fast enough to fill that gap. And then just a period of low energy prices over several years in which investment around the world was much lower, and the cushion of spare capacity really dropped off. And of course, very much in 2020 when we were hit very hard by the pandemic, but there were several years of low prices even before that.
بالرغم من أزمة الطاقة والعقوبات غير المسبوقة، إلا أن الاضطرابات التي نتجت عنها بقيت حتى الساعة على أقله محدودة نوعا ما تفسيرك روبن لذلك؟
I think really three things. The first thing is that the market has turned out to be much more flexible and adaptable than people might have expected. And fortunately, governments have mostly avoided getting in the way of the market and trying to have counterproductive policies. They've subsidized people. They've tried to make things easy for consumers and who are struggling with energy bills. But largely they've avoided meddling in the market. The second thing I think is that in some ways it's unfortunate, but in some ways fortunate. The economy has been fairly soft, and there have been all these worries about recession, particularly later in 2022. So there wasn't as strong energy demand as there might have been elsewhere, and particularly that's certainly helped out on the oil side. And then I think thirdly, of course, is that the winter in Europe has so far been warm, unusually warm. So Europe has not been burning huge amounts of gas as it might have done in the cold winter. And so gas prices have actually dropped and stocks of gas have been quite comfortable.
إحدى التبعات المتوقعة للحرب الأوكرانية والعقوبات المرتبطة بها هي نهاية سوق النفط العالمية الحرة ونشوء سوق نفطية مقسمة وذات تدفقات تجارية مجزأة. هل برأيك روبن هذه هي نتيجة حتمية؟ وكيف ترى تطور الأمور على هذا الصعيد؟
Yeah, this is something that we've seen some small signs of for a few years, right? We have US sanctions on Iran. That means Iranian oil basically only goes to China. We have sanctions on Venezuela. Then we have the kind of US-China tensions, which is affecting energy supplies and people's decisions on where to buy energy from. And then, of course, from the start of 2022, the war in Ukraine, which completely changes the look of the oil market. So now Europe has introduced pretty much a complete ban on imports of Russian crude oil. From February this year, it will have a ban on imports of refined oil products as well. So that means Russian oil has to go to other countries. It has to go to India, China, Turkey, places like that are still able to take Russian oil and at a substantial discount. And so you basically have oils, almost identical oil from the Middle East, let's say, compared to Russian oil, and yet those oils can trade at very different prices, and the Russian oil can only go to certain buyers. So we have this split oil market, and this is really a big change. We've had before this a very flexible market in oil very free market from the late 80s onwards. This is now broken down. And I think it's hard to see how this will be put back together again in the next few years.
أخيرا روبن، التنبؤ بالمستقبل عادة رهان خاسر، ولكن ما هي توقعاتك للعام الحالي؟ هل سيكون أفضل من العام 2022 برأيك؟
Well, I think we can, expect plenty of surprises. Obviously, the war goes on. All of the sanctions action and the policies of Europe and the US to counter Russia will continue. The US-China tensions continue as well. Plenty of room for unpredictable developments. However, I do feel it'll be a better year because I think we're over the initial shock. We're seeing a lot of adaptation. We're seeing improvements in energy efficiency. We're seeing a ramp up of renewable energy. We're seeing new developments in the oil market, and give it a couple of years, we'll see new developments in the gas market, new supplies coming. So yes, I think things are, they are tough for a lot of people, but they're not as bad as they might have been.